For 9 years, families posed for vacation photos at Paradise Trailhead in Washington state. They smiled. They hiked. They never knew that buried beneath the massive roots of an ancient Douglas fir tree, hidden just 70 feet from the parking lot, was the body of Samantha Ward, a 31-year-old teacher who disappeared during a solo hike in October 2007. But when hunters stumbled upon her remains in 2016, they discovered something far more disturbing than a tragic accident. Carved wooden figures, 12 of them, each one representing a victim. And investigators realized a serial killer had been operating in these mountains for over a decade, leaving behind a signature no one had noticed. Until now. Samantha Ward was 31 when she vanished. She taught 4th grade at Cascade Elementary School in Tacoma. Her students adored her. Her colleagues described her as dedicated and impossibly organized. But teaching was only half of who Samantha was. The other half belonged to the mountains. She grew up in a family that lived for the outdoors. Her father, Owen Brooks, worked as a climbing instructor for the Cascade Mountain School. 32 years teaching people how to survive when everything went wrong, how to read weather patterns that could kill you in minutes, how to build emergency shelters from branches and rope, how to navigate when technology failed and darkness fell. He led rescue operations, retrieved injured climbers from impossible positions, talked panicked hikers through blizzards using nothing but a radio and experience. Her mother, Naomi Freeman, was a forest ecologist who led university expeditions into the wilderness. She could identify poisonous plants from 50 feet away, track animal movements through subtle disturbances in undergrowth, predict storms by watching how trees bent in wind. She taught students that wilderness wasn't something to conquer, it was something to understand, respect, learn from. Every weekend of Samantha's childhood was spent on trails. By age 10, she could start fires in pouring rain. By 15, she could navigate using stars alone. By 20, she could read alpine terrain better than most rangers who'd spent decades in uniform. Her parents didn't just teach wilderness skills. They taught her that mountains could be beautiful and deadly in the same breath, that nature demanded respect always. After college, Samantha moved to Tacoma to start teaching. The transition was difficult. City noise replaced forest silence. Concrete replaced dirt trails. Her apartment felt suffocating after years of sleeping under open sky. But she found her rhythm, made friends, built a life, yet she never stopped returning to the mountains. Every month, sometimes twice a month, she packed her gear and drove north. Those drives became ritual, meditation, transformation. With each mile, she felt city stress falling away, traffic noise fading, obligations dissolving. By the time she reached trailheads, she wasn't teacher Samantha anymore. She was Mountain Samantha, the version of herself that felt most authentic. She preferred hiking alone, not because she disliked company, but because solitude gave her space to think, to process, to exist without performing any role. Her best friend Paige worried about the solo trips. They'd had the conversation dozens of times over coffee, over lunch, over phone calls that stretched into hours. Paige would say it wasn't safe. Samantha would remind her that she had more training than most professional guides, that she carried emergency equipment, that she always filed trip plans, that being afraid of wilderness was like being afraid of the ocean. Respect it, understand it, but don't let fear keep you from experiencing something extraordinary. But what Samantha didn't know was that someone had been watching hikers like her for years. Someone who knew these mountains as well as she did. In mid-October 2007, Samantha was exhausted. The school year had started with unexpected challenges. 32 students, several with behavioral issues, new curriculum standards, and organizing the school's Halloween carnival. By Wednesday, October 17th, Samantha told her best friend Paige Lawson she needed to escape. Just for a weekend, just to clear her mind. Thursday morning, October 18th, Samantha drove to her parents' house near Enumclaw. She arrived around noon. Her mother prepared lunch while her father inspected Samantha's hiking gear, a ritual they'd followed since she was a teenager. He checked her boots, tested her headlamp batteries, confirmed her first aid kit was stocked. Samantha assured him it was a straightforward overnight trip. The Skyline Trail, a route they'd hiked together countless times. She'd be back Sunday evening. Her father nodded, but years later he'd remember this moment. Remember the feeling that he should have insisted on going with her, should have done something to change what happened next. Friday morning, October 19th at 6:30, Samantha loaded her blue backpack into her silver Toyota and left. She stopped at a convenience store in Ashford at 7:45. Brief conversation with the clerk about weather, clear weekend, cold nights. She bought a protein bar and water, then drove north. She arrived at Paradise Trailhead at 8:50. The visitor logbook shows her entry. Neat handwriting. Planned route, Skyline Trail to Panorama Point, solo hike, expected return, October 21st evening. She signed her name. 900 hours. The trail was rated moderately strenuous, 5 miles, 1,700 feet elevation gain. She planned to camp near Panorama Point Friday night. Watch the sunrise over Mount Rainier Saturday morning. Return by late afternoon, a plan she'd executed successfully before, but this time would be different. The last confirmed sighting of Samantha Ward occurred at 2:15 Friday afternoon. A couple, Nathan Reed and Isabel Scott, were descending from Panorama Point. They encountered Samantha about half a mile from the summit. She appeared calm, happy, red fleece jacket, gray hiking pants, blue backpack properly secured. They exchanged brief comments about the view. Samantha mentioned she was looking forward to photographing the sunset. Nathan and Isabel continued their descent. They were the last people to see Samantha Ward alive. Somewhere between that conversation and sunset, Samantha encountered him. The wilderness survival instructor who'd been hunting women like her for over a decade. He approached her the way he always did, friendly, knowledgeable, offering information about trail conditions, building trust, making himself seem like just another hiker. She had no reason to be suspicious. He looks the part. Proper gear, confident demeanor, someone who clearly knew these mountains. But he wasn't safe. When Monday came, Samantha didn't show up for work. Her principal, Felicity Moore, immediately called Paige Lawson. Paige explained that Samantha had gone hiking but should have returned Sunday night. Felicity tried calling Samantha's cell phone. Every call went to voicemail. By Monday afternoon, Paige drove to Samantha's apartment. Everything looked normal, but mail had accumulated. The apartment had that empty feeling of a place where no one had been for days. Paige called Samantha's parents. Owen and Naomi had expected a call Sunday evening. When it didn't come, they assumed she'd extended her trip, not unusual. But when Paige said Samantha had missed work without notification, something she would never do, Owen felt cold dread settle in his chest. He called the Washington State Department of Natural Resources Rangers immediately. By Tuesday morning, October 23rd, a search operation was underway. Ranger Blake Anderson located Samantha's Toyota, locked. Through the windows, he could see a water bottle, road atlas, and her lesson planner. Nothing disturbed. A search team of 14 rangers and volunteers began working the Skyline Trail Tuesday afternoon. They reached Panorama Point, searched the summit area, found nothing. No abandoned gear, no campsite signs, no evidence Samantha had reached the viewpoint at all. Wednesday, teams expanded the search, checked alternate trails, rocky ledges where injured hikers might have fallen, drainage areas where someone disoriented could wander, areas where cell phone signals were weak or non-existent, search dogs deployed with handlers who'd worked hundreds of rescue operations. But heavy rains Monday night had washed away scent trails. The dogs found nothing, no direction, no trail, just confusion and frustration. Samantha's parents arrived Thursday morning. Owen Brooks looked older than he had just days earlier. Naomi's eyes were hollow from sleepless nights. Owen insisted on joining search teams despite ranger protests that civilians slowed operations. He knew this range intimately, knew secret viewpoints only locals understood, knew shortcuts Samantha might have taken, places they'd camped together, places she loved. He led teams to every location, small meadow where they'd seen elk 5 years ago, rock formations shaped like profile of a face, creek crossing where Samantha always stopped to filter water. Searchers checked every spot, no trace, no sign she'd been there, no evidence she'd deviated from planned route. But something gnawed at Owen, a feeling in his gut that veterans of wilderness learned to trust. Samantha was too skilled to simply disappear. She carried 3 forms of emergency signaling, whistle that could be heard for miles, signal mirror that could catch aircraft attention, headlamp bright enough to signal rescuers at night. If she'd been injured, if she'd needed help, she would have made herself visible. She knew protocols, knew survival priorities, knew how to be found. The fact that searchers found absolutely nothing didn't make sense. No drop gear, no disturbed campsites, no broken branches indicating someone pushed through undergrowth, no footprints off trail, no blood, no torn fabric caught on rocks. Nothing. It was as if she'd stepped off the trail and evaporated into mountain air. And that's when investigators should have asked a different question. What if this wasn't about getting lost? What if Samantha didn't fall? What if she didn't suffer medical emergency? What if something else happened? Something deliberate? Something planned? Something that looked like wilderness accident but wasn't? But they didn't ask those questions yet. Not in October 2007. The assumption was wilderness tragedy, injury leading to exposure, disorientation causing bad decisions, fall from rocky ledge, medical emergency like heart attack or stroke. The mountains claimed hikers sometimes, even experienced ones, even those who knew better. Statistics supported that assumption. Logic supported it. Experience supported it. The search continued for 4 weeks. Helicopters surveyed from above. Ground teams covered 30 square miles. Volunteers distributed flyers. News stations broadcast appeals. But as October turned to November and temperatures dropped below freezing, finding Samantha alive became impossible. Detective Logan Pierce of the Washington State Patrol took over in early November. 16 years experience in missing persons cases. He interviewed everyone who'd had contact with Samantha before her disappearance. Colleagues confirmed she'd been tired but normal. No depression, no financial problems. Phone records showed routine calls, nothing suspicious. Pierce paid attention to one detail: the convenience store clerk who'd spoken with Samantha Friday morning. Young man who also worked as wilderness guide. Background check came back clean. But Pierce dug deeper. 4 years earlier, a woman had filed a complaint against this clerk. Said he made her uncomfortable during a guided trip. Persistent personal questions. The company investigated. Found it credible but not severe enough for termination. Formal reprimand. Professional conduct training. Pierce tracked the woman down. She was living in Portland now. She remembered the incident vividly. The clerk had been overly interested in whether she hiked alone, where she went, whether she told people her plans. She felt like he was assessing her vulnerability. After the trip, he sent multiple text messages. She blocked his number. Never hiked that area again. Pierce brought the clerk in for another interview, asked him to account for his whereabouts the weekend Samantha disappeared. Home improvement projects, college football, no witnesses. Pierce requested a search warrant. Judge denied it. Insufficient probable cause. But investigators didn't know they were looking at the wrong person entirely. By late November, the search was suspended. Case reclassified as missing person investigation. Samantha's family was shattered. Owen couldn't accept that his daughter had vanished. He returned to the mountains week after week, walking trails, calling Samantha's name. Naomi fell into severe depression. The not knowing was more agonizing than any confirmed tragedy. In December, Samantha's parents hired private investigator Ashton Briggs. He re-interviewed everyone, reviewed all evidence, and he noticed something. Multiple outdoor companies had employees with similar complaints. Wilderness guides, survival instructors, men who asked too many questions about female clients hiking alone. One name kept appearing in different contexts, different companies, different states. A wilderness survival instructor who'd worked across Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, and Montana over 15 years. His employment timeline aligned with unsolved missing persons cases, but without concrete evidence, there was nothing law enforcement could do. Months turned into years. Samantha's case joined the growing list of unsolved disappearances. Her file gathered dust in storage boxes. Her parents aged visibly. Lines deepened around Owen's eyes. Gray streaked through Naomi's hair. The not knowing consumed them slowly, relentlessly, without mercy. But other women kept disappearing, and nobody connected the patterns yet. Spring 2010. Brooke Carter, 24-year-old graduate student studying environmental science at University of Washington. She was writing thesis on climate change impacts on subalpine ecosystems, needed data from high-elevation research sites, Planned 3-day solo backpacking trip on Pacific Crest Trail to collect samples and measurements. Left her apartment April 15th with equipment and optimism. Her car was found at Trailhead near Snoqualmie Pass 3 days later. Keys locked inside. Backpack missing from trunk suggesting she'd started her hike. Park rangers launched search. Found her first campsite. Evidence she'd stayed there one night. Proper bear hang, clean campsite. Everything by protocol. But after that campsite, nothing. She never made it to her second planned location. Never collected her data. Never came home. Search lasted 2 weeks. Covered 40 square miles. Found nothing except that single campsite. Brooke Carter vanished somewhere between mile 8 and mile 15 of her planned route. Her family held out hope for months. Maybe she had amnesia. Maybe she'd been taken by someone and was being held captive. Maybe she'd run away to start new life, though that made no sense given her close relationship with her parents and her dedication to finishing her degree. Eventually, hope faded. Brooke Carter became another name in unsolved missing persons database. Another family wondering. Another set of parents who'd never know what happened to their daughter. Fall 2012. Victoria Hayes, 36-year-old nature photographer whose work appeared in National Geographic, Outside Magazine, and dozens of other publications. She was documenting old-growth forests for magazine assignment, specifically looking for trees over 500 years old. Wanted to capture them in autumn colors, the assignment that would define her career. October 8th, she drove to Alpine Lakes Wilderness, left note on her kitchen counter for her partner saying she'd be back by October 11th. Expected to shoot sunrise and sunset at several locations. Had list of specific trees she wanted to photograph based on Forest Service data and GPS coordinates. Her SUV was found at Trailhead October 12th. Camera equipment gone. Hiking pack missing. Cell phone sitting on passenger seat with battery dead. Search teams worked for 3 weeks. Found one of her camera lens caps on trail. Found nothing else. No campsite, no footprints leading off trail. No indication of where she went after dropping that lens cap at mile marker 7. Victoria's partner organized private search parties, hired helicopter companies to survey from air, paid for additional dog teams. Nothing worked. Victoria Hayes was gone. Her camera with its final photographs was never recovered. Her family never learned what shots she'd captured before she vanished, what she'd seen, what had happened. Detective Pierce kept noting the similarities. All solo women hikers, all experienced, all knowledgeable about wilderness safety, all carrying proper equipment, all filing trip plans, all doing everything right, yet all vanishing without leaving evidence. No bodies, no struggle signs, no witnesses, just gone. He built database on personal time, searched missing persons reports from multiple states, found more cases matching the pattern. Woman named Jennifer in 2003, disappeared hiking Mount Hood in Oregon. Woman named Michelle in 2005, vanished on trail in Northern California. Woman named Amanda in 2008, last seen hiking in Idaho's Sawtooth Range. Pierce requested meeting with FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, was told his cases didn't meet criteria for federal involvement. Different jurisdictions, different states, different years, no confirmed homicides, just missing persons, not their mandate. He was on his own. What Pierce didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that someone had been perfecting their method for over a decade. Someone who understood that serial killers got caught because they left patterns. Obvious connections. Similar victimology in same geographic area. Same methods, same disposal sites. But if you spread your kills across multiple states, if you waited months or years between victims, if you varied your approach slightly each time, if you hid bodies where they'd never be found, you could hunt for decades without detection. And that someone knew these mountains the way most people knew their own neighborhoods, knew secret places tourists never saw, knew how to move through wilderness without leaving trace, knew how to approach solo hikers without triggering alarm, knew exactly what to say to build trust, knew when to strike, knew how to make it look like accident, knew how to ensure bodies stayed hidden. Garrett Lawson had been preparing for this his entire adult life. Every wilderness course he taught gave him information. Every client he guided gave him opportunity to study human behavior. Every trail he walked gave him knowledge of potential disposal sites. Every year gave him more confidence, more skill, more certainty he'd never be caught. October 2016. Everything changed. Two hunters, brothers Caden Wright and Landon Pierce, were tracking elk near Paradise Trailhead. Moving through dense forest about 100 yards from the parking area, Caden noticed something unusual. The roots of a massive Douglas fir had partially exposed disturbed soil. Too large, too deliberate. They approached. Caden saw fabric, red, partially buried. He brushed away dirt carefully. Beneath the soil, what looked like a jacket sleeve. He called 911. Within an hour, Ranger Blake Anderson arrived. He recognized the location immediately. He'd walked past this tree dozens of times during the 2007 search. The grave had been right here, 70 feet from the parking lot. Detective Logan Pierce arrived 2 hours later. Forensic team carefully excavated. What they found was heartbreaking and horrifying. Human remains, clothing fragments consistent with what Samantha Ward wore, a backpack, and something else that changed everything. Buried with the body were 12 small wooden figures, each meticulously carved, each roughly 4 inches tall, each unique, different hairstyles, different poses, different features. They were trophies. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains were Samantha Ward's. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull, struck from behind with a heavy object. The attack was sudden. She probably never saw it coming. But those wooden figures, those were the key. Pierce contacted forensic experts specializing in criminal signatures. Each figure represented a female form, each one carefully crafted. Hours of work invested. These weren't hastily made. They were deliberate, personal, meaningful to the killer. Pierce immediately thought of the other missing hikers. If each figure represented a victim, there were 12 total. 11 more bodies might be buried somewhere. Over the next 6 months, investigators found 3 more grave sites, each near popular trailheads, each hidden beneath tree roots or rocks, each containing remains and wooden figures. By mid-2017, investigators had recovered remains of 6 victims, all matched women who disappeared between 2000 and 2013. There was a serial killer operating in the Pacific Northwest, targeting solo female hikers, and he was still out there. The breakthrough came when forensic specialists analyzed the wood, Western red cedar, but under microscopic examination they found unusual tool marks. The carver used a very specific knife, slightly curved blade, distinctive wear pattern, custom wood carving knife. Pierce sent inquiries to wood carving supply companies. Most didn't keep records going back that far, but one small shop in Eugene, Oregon had meticulous sales logs. They remembered a customer who ordered a custom knife in 1998. The customer's name was Garrett Lawson. Pierce ran Garrett Lawson through every database. 36 years old, worked as wilderness survival instructor for multiple companies over 15 years. No criminal record. His employment timeline matched almost perfectly with locations and dates of the missing hikers. But there was more. In 2003, a woman filed a complaint against Lawson, said he made her uncomfortable during a survival course, asked intrusive questions about whether she lived alone, whether she hiked solo, whether anyone would notice if she missed work. The company investigated, found it credible but not severe enough for termination. Warning and training, the exact same pattern, but Lawson was the real predator. Pierce obtained warrant to search Lawson's residence in Spokane. Tactical team executed warrant at dawn November 3, 2017. Wore body cameras, brought forensic specialists, expected to find evidence, maybe find Lawson himself. When officers arrived, house was empty, not just empty of people, empty in a way that suggested careful planning. Refrigerator cleaned out, utilities canceled week earlier. Mail forwarded to P.O. Box in Montana, lawn recently mowed suggesting someone maintained appearances until final departure. Neighbors said Lawson hadn't been seen since mid-October. Over 2 weeks gone. Vehicle missing. Bank account showed final transaction, October 18th. Withdrawal cleaning out checking account. Savings account closed day earlier. Garrett Lawson had vanished precisely when investigators closed in, almost as if he'd been monitoring investigation. Watching news coverage, tracking search operations, knowing exactly when to run. Investigators searched property thoroughly anyway. Basement revealed woodworking studio, professional setup, quality tools, dust collection system, organized workbench, dozens of carved figures lined shelves along walls. Most were abstract shapes or animal designs. Bears catching salmon, eagles in flight, elk with massive antlers, mountains under star-filled skies, nature scenes that could be sold at craft fairs, beautiful work, skillful carving, hours of practice evident in every piece. But in locked drawer underneath workbench, they found 13 more figures. These were different, smaller, more delicate, more personal, female forms, each distinct, each carefully crafted, each unique in pose and detail. These weren't art, these were records, documentation, trophies. Each figure represented victim. Investigators compared carvings to photos of missing women. Matched details, hair length, facial structure, body type. Lawson had carved them from memory. After killing each woman, he'd returned home and commemorated murder in wood, created permanent record of his crimes. Private gallery only he would see. They also found journals, leather-bound notebooks filling entire shelf, dated entries going back to 1997. At first glance, they appeared innocent. Hiking logs, trail conditions, weather observations, campsite locations, maps with routes marked, elevation profiles, all seemingly normal outdoor documentation that any serious hiker might keep. But investigators noticed other entries mixed throughout. Notes about women, not by name but by description. Blonde, late 20s, solo, good gear, confident, filed trip plan. Ranger station said she checks in regularly. Another entry, brunette, early 30s, excellent shape, moves fast, knows the trails, wedding ring. Told Ranger she hikes alone to decompress from work stress. Lawson had been stalking potential victims for years, observing them at trailheads, following at distance, learning their patterns, taking notes, assessing vulnerability, planning. Some observations had dates, some had trail names, some had check marks in margin. Others had X marks. The check marks corresponded to women who'd disappeared. The X marks presumably indicated women he'd considered but rejected for some reason. One entry read, "Too many people around. Group of 4 arrived just before I could approach. Abandoned plan." Another, "Seemed nervous. Kept looking back. Intuition working. Not good candidate." Lawson had criteria, requirements his victims needed to meet. Solo hiking, confident demeanor, proper equipment indicating experience. Some evidence of trip plan filing showing responsibility, but also some vulnerability, some indication they wouldn't raise immediate alarm bells. He wanted women who knew what they were doing but weren't paranoid. Women who'd trust fellow hiker offering helpful information. Women who'd believe they were safe because they'd taken precautions. Women whose disappearances wouldn't immediately be suspicious because experienced hikers do have accidents. DNA evidence from Samantha Ward's clothing matched DNA found on woodworking tools in Lawson's workshop. Hair samples, skin cells, genetic material transferred during carving process or while handling victims' belongings. Trace evidence from other victims found throughout the studio. Fibers matching Victoria Hayes's jacket. Soil samples matching area where Brooke Carter vanished. Forensic accountants traced Lawson's finances backward through years of records. Found property purchase in Montana under false name, 90 acres of forested land, no address, no structures on tax records, just raw land accessed by logging roads. Purchased 2009 through Shell Company, registered in Wyoming. Taxes paid from offshore account connected to another Shell Company. Lawson had been planning escape route for years, building layers of anonymity, creating false identities, establishing bolt hole where he could disappear if necessary. Tactical team raided Montana property, January 12, 2018. Difficult location, no road access final 5 miles. Required helicopter insertion. Snow 3 feet deep. Temperature minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Team included federal marshals, state police, and FBI agents because case now spanned multiple states. They found rough cabin, no electricity, no running water, Wood stove for heat, kerosene lamps for light, hand pump well for water. Off-grid survivalist setup. Inside, more evidence, more journals, more carvings, more maps, more documentation of decade-long killing spree. And map with 13 locations marked in red marker. 12 corresponded to known burial sites where victims had already been recovered. 13th location had never been searched. Remote area near Columbia River Gorge. Difficult terrain, rarely visited, perfect hiding place. Pierce organized excavation at 13th site, required week of planning. Remote location meant limited access. Had to helicopter in forensic team and equipment. Had to establish base camp. Had to work in winter conditions. They searched for 3 days using ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and methodical grid search. Temperature never rose above freezing. Wind made it feel colder. Difficult work. Exhausting. Frustrating. Then cadaver dog alerted. Specific location beneath rock formation. Team began careful excavation. Found grave. Hidden beneath rock overhang. Protected from weather. Preserved better than other remains. Human remains and wooden figures. Same pattern, same ritual, same signature. Remains were identified through dental records as Chelsea Morgan, 28-year-old botanist who disappeared October 1999 while researching native plant species for doctoral dissertation. Her case had never been connected to others because it predated Pierce's investigation timeline. She'd been first victim, or at least first victim investigators had evidence for now. 13 confirmed victims, not 12. 13 women whose lives were stolen by man who used wilderness expertise to hunt them, who studied them, who planned meticulously, who killed efficiently, who hid evidence expertly. But Garrett Lawson himself was never found, never arrested, never prosecuted, never faced justice in courtroom. March 23, 2018. Day hiker discovered backpack beside trail near Canadian border in North Cascades National Park. Expensive technical pack. Good condition. But abandoned, sitting upright against tree as if placed deliberately. Hiker opened it looking for identification to return to owner. Inside found wallet containing Garrett Lawson's driver's license, credit cards, passport, and handwritten note folded carefully, placed deliberately where it would be found. Note was brief, handwriting matched samples from Lawson's journals, message clear and final. The mountains take everyone eventually. Some of us deserve it. That was last trace of Garrett for Lawson. That was 7 years ago. He's been gone ever since. Either dead somewhere in vast wilderness, or alive under new identity in remote location far from civilization. Some investigators believe Lawson committed suicide deep in the wilderness, body consumed by animals or decomposed beyond recognition. Others believe he faked his death, living under new identity, possibly Canada or Alaska. There have been unconfirmed sightings. Each lead went nowhere. Hat is certain. Garrett Lawson murdered at least 13 women between 1999 and 2013. He targeted solo female hikers who were experienced and confident, used his position as wilderness instructor to gain trust, to gather information, to identify victims. He struck when they were most vulnerable, alone on remote trails where no one could hear them scream. The wooden figures were his way of commemorating kills. Each represented a victim, trophies buried alongside bodies as markers of his power over them. For families of the 13 victims, there is finally closure. They know what happened. They know their loved ones didn't suffer long. They know where their bodies rest. But, questions remain. Forensic psychologists believe Lawson may have started killing earlier than 1999. His earliest journal entries suggest he'd already developed his methods. There may be victims from the 1990s investigators haven't identified yet. And then there's the 14th carving. When investigators cataloged figures from Lawson's basement, they found 13 replicas matching known victims. But there was an additional figure, a 14th carving that didn't match any recovered remains. More recent, less weathered, as if Lawson carved it shortly before he disappeared. Did Garrett Lawson kill a 14th victim investigators haven't found? Or was he planning his next target? The 14th figure has been analyzed extensively. Forensic artists created facial reconstruction. Woman in early 30s, long dark hair, slender build. No missing persons reports match the description. Detective Logan Pierce, now retired, keeps a copy of that reconstruction on his desk. He reviews old case files regularly, checks missing persons databases. Nothing has emerged. In 2021, 3 years after Lawson vanished, a park ranger in Glacier National Park discovered something during trail maintenance. Carved into bark of an ancient hemlock tree were 14 sets of initials. 13 matched known victims. The 14th set remains unidentified. Was there a 14th victim investigators never discovered? Or was Lawson planning his next target? The question haunts those who work the case. Some believe the 14th carving is Lawson's final game, deliberate mystery left behind to torment law enforcement. Others believe there genuinely is another victim whose disappearance was never reported. The truth remains unknown. Samantha Ward deserved better. She was a teacher who inspired students, a daughter who made her parents proud, a friend who showed up when people needed her. She loved the mountains because they made her feel fully alive. And in the place she felt safest, she encountered a predator. Samantha's body was returned to her family in 2017. Owen Brooks and Naomi Freeman held a memorial service at a chapel overlooking the Cascade Range. Hundreds attended. Former students shared stories about how Samantha changed their lives. Paige Lawson spoke about a friendship spanning 2 decades. Owen Brooks stood at the podium, tears streaming down his face. Samantha knew these mountains better than most people ever will. She understood risk. She took precautions. She was prepared. But she couldn't have prepared for evil. None of us can. We can be careful. We can be smart. But we can't eliminate every danger. And that's the truth to accept. Paradise Trailhead is still open. The Douglas fir where Samantha was found has been marked with a small bronze plaque in memory of Samantha Ward and all those who found peace in these mountains. Hikers often leave flowers at the tree's base. It's become an unofficial memorial where people pause to remember that beauty and danger can exist in the same space. For those who hike alone, Samantha's story serves as a reminder. Tell someone where you're going. Check in regularly. Trust your instincts. Carry personal locator beacon. Understand that experience doesn't guarantee safety. Samantha Ward was an expert. Decades of training. She still became a victim. The Cascade Range is still breathtaking. Trails still worth exploring. But they forever carry the shadow of Garrett Lawson and 13 lives he stole. And somewhere, possibly beneath roots of another tree, there might be evidence of a 14th victim. A woman whose family doesn't know what happened. Now, before we go any further, I need to talk about something that's been bothering me since I started researching this case. Something that keeps me up at night. Something that doesn't add up no matter how many times I review the evidence. When Garrett Lawson disappeared in 2018, he left behind that note. The mountains take everyone eventually. Some of us deserve it. Some investigators immediately closed the case, assumed he died. Suicide driven by guilt. Exposure to elements. Fatal accident in treacherous terrain. Case closed. Move on to next investigation. File away as solved even though body was never recovered. But here's what bothers me, what haunts me, what I can't reconcile with known facts. Garrett Lawson was survival expert. Not amateur hiker, not weekend warrior who watched too many YouTube videos about wilderness skills. Professional wilderness instructor with 20 years experience teaching people how to survive in conditions that would kill most humans within days. He knew edible plants, could identify them in darkness using touch and smell, knew water purification methods using materials found in forest, knew shelter construction from branches, bark, and moss, knew fire starting in rain, snow, wind, knew navigation without technology, knew how to hunt, how to trap, how to fish, how to live off land indefinitely. He'd survived countless nights in freezing temperatures, weathered storms that sent other hikers running for vehicles, endured conditions that park rangers wouldn't enter. He'd taught survival courses where students learned to thrive with nothing but knife and determination. So why would we believe he suddenly couldn't survive himself? Why would man who spent 2 decades teaching survival skills walk into mountains and die accidentally? Doesn't make sense. Not to me. Not when I look at evidence objectively. Not when I set aside assumptions and examine facts. I think Garrett Lawson is still alive. I think he staged his death carefully and deliberately. I think he's living somewhere remote under new identity. Possibly Canada, where population is sparse and people don't ask intrusive questions. Possibly Alaska, where you can disappear into wilderness and never be found. Possibly a remote area of northern British Columbia or Yukon Territory, where towns are separated by hundreds of miles of empty forest and government services are minimal. And here's why I believe that, why this theory makes more sense than official narrative. The backpack they found near Canadian border? Too convenient, too perfect, too staged. Everything was preserved exactly as it should be for discovery. His wallet placed carefully where it would be seen immediately upon opening pack. His ID visible. Credit cards arranged neatly. That handwritten note folded precisely, placed where it couldn't be missed. If Lawson actually died in wilderness through accident or exposure, nature would have scattered his belongings. Bears would have investigated backpack looking for food. Ravens would have pecked at fabric. Rain would have soaked everything. Wind would have blown light items away. Small animals would have nested in pack. Decomposition of his body nearby would have attracted scavengers who'd have disturbed area significantly. But everything was neat, organized, carefully arranged, almost like it was meant to be found, like it was message, like it was final statement from man who wanted last word, from narcissist who needed to control narrative, even in absence. And that 14th wooden figure found in his workshop. I think Lawson carved it after he knew investigators were closing in, after he realized they'd found burial sites, after he understood his time was running out and he needed to vanish. I think it was his final act of defiance, his way of maintaining power over situation, his method of ensuring he'd haunt investigators forever. He wanted to leave behind eternal mystery, something that would torment law enforcement, something that would remind them he was smarter than they were, that he got away, that he won, that they'd never have a complete picture, never know everything, never close all cases, never provide closure to every family. That's mindset of narcissism, someone who needs to feel superior even when everything is falling apart around them, someone who can't accept being caught completely, someone who needs one last victory, one last secret, one last way to maintain dominance over the situation and people pursuing him. But here's counter-argument, and I have to acknowledge it's strong, very strong, maybe stronger than my theory. Maybe I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. Maybe I'm refusing to accept simple explanation because it doesn't satisfy my need for dramatic conclusion. Maybe Garrett Lawson did die out there in those mountains. Maybe guilt finally overwhelmed him. Maybe years of killing caught up psychologically. Maybe he couldn't live with what he'd done. Maybe facing evidence of 13 murders was too much even for someone as cold and calculated as he was. Maybe pressure of knowing investigators were closing in broke him psychologically in ways he couldn't handle. Maybe knowing his face would be on every news channel, his name would be synonymous with evil. His life was over, regardless of whether he was physically caught. Maybe that realization was more than he could bear. Maybe he chose death over capture. Maybe he chose to die in wilderness he had used to kill rather than face courtroom and prison. And maybe, just maybe, his body is decomposing somewhere in North Cascades exactly where he intended. Exactly where his suggested. Exactly where he wanted to be. We might never find him because that wilderness is vast beyond comprehension, unforgiving beyond measure, capable of erasing human remains completely within few years through combination of scavengers, weather, and natural decomposition. Maybe mountains did take him eventually. Maybe he got exactly what he deserved. Maybe justice was served in form of lonely death in cold forest. Maybe that's the truth. Maybe my theory about him being alive is nothing more than refusal to accept that sometimes endings aren't dramatic. Sometimes killers just die quietly. Sometimes there is no final confrontation, no arrest, no trial, no prison sentence. Just death in wilderness, silent, unremarkable, final. So I'm asking you directly, what do you think? And I genuinely want to know. This isn't rhetorical question designed to boost engagement. This is real question with real uncertainty, because this case doesn't have clean ending. It has theories, possibilities, arguments supporting multiple conclusions, but no certainty, no proof either direction, no closure. Is Garrett Lawson alive, living under false identity somewhere remote, watching news coverage of his case from cabin in woods, laughing at investigators who think he's dead, reading true crime articles about himself online, still out there somewhere after all these 7 years, growing older but free? Or did he die in those mountains, finally becoming victim of same wilderness he used to hunt his prey? Did guilt destroy him? Did fear of being caught break him? Did mountains claim him the way they claimed his victims? Is his body somewhere under snow and soil and pine needles? Bones scattered by animals? Skull weathered by rain? All evidence of his existence slowly returning to Earth? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know, because this case doesn't have a clean ending. It has theories, possibilities, but no certainty. And what about that 14th victim? Do you think she exists? Or was Lawson playing mind games, carving a figure that represents no one, just to create mystery that would never be solved? Some believe every carving represents a real person. Others believe the 14th figure was his twisted way of saying, you don't know everything. What's your theory? If this case affected you the way it affected me, subscribe to this channel. We don't cover surface-level true crime. We go deep. We find cases that took years to solve. We present stories with respect and detail they deserve. We honor victims by telling their stories accurately. Hit that subscribe button. Next week, we're covering a case where the victim was found alive 23 years after disappearing. When you hear where she was and why no one found her, you're going to question how something like that is possible. I read every comment, so tell me, do you think Garrett Lawson is alive? Do you think there's a 14th victim? If you were leading this investigation, what would you do next? Your theories matter. Sometimes viewers catch details investigators missed. Sometimes your perspectives open up angles I haven't considered. If you know someone who hikes alone, share this story, not to scare them, but to remind them that precautions matter. Tell someone where you're going, carry personal locator beacon, check in regularly, trust your instincts. Samantha Ward did many of those things, but she couldn't have known that danger wasn't nature. It was human evil disguised as wilderness expert. One more thing, if you recognize the description of that 14th carved figure, if you know someone who went missing in the Pacific Northwest between 2010 and 2018, if you have any information about unsolved disappearances in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, or Montana, contact the Washington State Patrol. Even the smallest detail could solve this final mystery. Until next time, stay safe. Look out for each other. Trust your instincts. Remember that evil can exist anywhere, even in the most beautiful places on Earth. The wilderness demands respect, but it also demands we never assume we're completely safe, no matter how much experience we have. Samantha Ward's story is a reminder of that truth. Her memory deserves to be honored by making sure we learn from what happened to her.